All righty. Okay, welcome to Tuesday Talks. Thank you everybody for joining us. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are today. And I'm gonna give it 1 second because I hear an echo of myself. So I'm gonna make sure I turn off my streaming on this side. As you all know, Tuesday Talks, we stream on multiple places. So if you are looking for Chinese support, we are on Xiaotong, and I'm going to put the other links here in the chat. So if you haven't already opened up your chat box and your Q&A box, I would welcome you to do that as quickly as possible, because as is always the case for Tuesday Talks, we're hoping for people to be engaged. So if you have a question, you should ask it right away, because this is a conversation. At Initial V, we always talk about life being a conversation. And so I'm hoping to use your questions as a guide to help us have a great conversation here today. Tuesday Talks Summer Edition is a little bit different than what we usually have for Tuesday Talks. I get to invite people that are not admissions officers to have this conversation with me. And we talk about some topics that we don't normally talk about during kind of the fall and spring series. So today I'm really excited to be welcoming both counselors, VP coordinator, principal, and admissions officer to talk about something that a lot of you have been asking questions about over the year, which is the IB curriculum. And some of you might even be like, what is an IB curriculum? And so if that's the case, I'm really glad you decided to join us. But I'm guessing that most of you have a sense, maybe you're already in the IB curriculum, you're looking to see if the IB curriculum is the best for you or your student. You're maybe a counselor who just wants to feel supported in the process. And so thank you so much for joining us. I am going to let my colleagues introduce themselves, and they'll introduce themselves and then we'll get started.
Okay, so I'll start off. Hi, everybody. It's great to see so many people online. My name is Nick Daniel. I'm an assistant head of high school and an IB diploma coordinator at a school in Beijing. It's called Keystone Academy, and it's an IB diploma and IB middle years program school.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. My name is Michelle Chow Liu, and I am head of high school counseling at Western Academy of Beijing, or we call WAB. And I've been here for over 17 years. So yeah, we're also an IB World School, so we're PYP, MYP, and the DP program.
Thank you, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rory Mcdonald from the UK. I'm one of the university counsellors at Dulwich College, Shanghai, Pudong. And this time last year, I was in the same position as I imagine many of you guys are tonight. I was new to IB. I just joined Dulwich, which is an IB and IGCSE school. But before that, I've been working at an A-level school for a number of years. So the past year for me has really been a voyage of discovery in terms of learning how the IB compares with other curriculums, and hopefully I can share a few of them, the ways I've been able to compare and contrast the IB with other curricula tonight.
Hi, everybody. My name's Kathleen Abels. Most people call me Kat, so you can feel free to do that. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the director of admission at Haverford College, a liberal arts and sciences college outside of Philadelphia in the United States. And generally someone who loves talking about different curricula. So really delighted to share this space with you all. So thanks for being here.
Amazing. And again, my name is Gloria. I'm one of the co-founders of Initial View, host of Tuesday Talks. Very excited that I get to have really enlightening, insightful conversations every Tuesday with amazing colleagues. And just even hearing your introductions, I'm like, oh, I invited the right people. And I'm very pleased to have you share space with me this morning or evening, wherever you are. Okay, so I'm going to share a slide here. And Nick is going to get us started to talk about what IB is and just give us a quick overview especially for those who aren't sure what we're talking about.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gloria. So I'll just run very, very quickly through the basics, the very basics of the IB diploma. And I guess the first thing to say is that it's a pre-university entrance qualification. It's accepted in 75 plus countries around the world, in over 2,000 universities across the world. So it's very, very well known. And just looking here at the mission, I'll just read briefly a couple of the words. The International Baccalaureate aims to develop inquiring, knowledgeable people who help create a better and more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. And I just wanted to share that because the word inquiring is really critical here. The IB diploma is really designed to develop students who know how to learn, who know how to ask open-ended questions, who are able to develop the skills for lifelong learning. It's also highly rigorous in terms of, especially with the higher level subjects, which I'll talk about in a moment. But if you compare with other similar programs around the world, you'll find that the content is just as rigorous, if not more rigorous than many other programs. So that's the academic side, the skills side. But on the other side, it's also a program which is designed to foster students who are mindful of the importance of being global citizens and developing respect for other cultures and having cultural and intercultural understanding. And of course, many of our DP students end up in situations where they're working in international environments, they're working across cultures. And so we really do develop those aspects of respect and understanding and really getting to know different perspectives and ways of thinking. We go on to the next slide. So I just wanted to give you some of the important threads in the DP. First, on a structural level, students study 6 subjects across 6 different areas of knowledge. And so what this means is it's a very broad-ranging program, which at the same time requires students to go into great depth in at least 3 subjects. So 3 of their subjects they study at higher level, 3 of their subjects they study at standard level. And when we start talking about college admissions, we'll be talking about how the choice of those subjects is very important in terms of what students want to end up doing in college or in university. As well as those 6 subject groups, there's something called the DP Core. And this is really where they're doing something called Theory of Knowledge, which is a very unique program in which students are asking questions about the nature of knowledge, the value of knowledge. They're learning how to think both critically and creatively. And so in that sense, it's another unique aspect of the DP program, which many other programs don't have. Within the core, they're also doing something called CAS, Creativity, Activity, Service. So that really brings out the extracurricular elements, but also very much emphasizes the service-natured aspects of the program. And then finally, something else that's very unique with the DP is that all students are expected to do an extended essay, which is a 4,000-word research essay, academic research in a very specific subject and topic, which is pretty much at a similar level to what students would be doing in the first year at college or university. So again, it's very unique in that sense. And I think a lot of admissions officers will say that this is one of the things that really stands out for these students. It's something that they can talk about in their letters of application to show that they really have an in-depth understanding of a particular academic area. The next slide. So I just wanted to show this because something that I think most IB diploma schools are very mindful of is that the IB philosophy is partly based around ideas about what economies and what work will look like in the future. And we're seeing a lot of changes and they're already happening all around us, as we all know, but work is changing. And so part of the mission of the IB is to try to foster students who are able to be very, very flexible, who can apply skills in a lot of different areas and who are under the understanding that we no longer have jobs for life. We need to constantly be upskilling and working towards new skills. And in that sense, I think the IB diploma really does help to foster that kind of growth-minded student who is very aware of what they need to learn in order to know how to learn and how to be a lifelong learner. Next slide. And then I just wanted to finish off a little bit by just referring to some of the research. And this is really, what others are saying around the world about IB diploma students and how they compare with other students from other programs. This research really shows that they really do have an edge in terms of university success. So enrollment in a top 20 university is generally higher for IB diploma students. First-class honors degree, that tends to go more to IB diploma students than to other students. And then more IB diploma students are likely to go on and complete post-study or postgraduate work after university. So these are all really, really good statistics here. Next slide. And then I find this one really interesting because this is really the sort of, I guess, the skill set that students have in the DP. And what this really shows is that some of those areas that I've been talking about in terms of the mission, for example, global mindedness, critical thinking, the ability to communicate across different cultures, cultural sensitivity, that's a really big one in the IB diploma. So in all these areas, IB students are pretty much seen by universities to have a slight edge in terms of these areas compared to other students. Next slide.
I think that was it. That's fantastic. That was a great overview. And I think as an interviewer at Initial View, we interview students from many, many, many curriculums. And I have always been struck by the IB student because they do have an ability to kind of do some of that critical thought in a very off-the-cuff way. And I think it's because of the curriculum, because they've been doing that since they were young, having to kind of manage a lot of different subjects and see how they connect. And so I appreciate kind of seeing some of those charts and numbers. Well, I wanted to start off with Kathleen, I'm going to start with you, just because I know a lot of people on this call are in that getting ready for college space. When you think about curriculum as an admissions officer, can you give us a sense of scope of what, you're now the director, so you look at everything, but before you were in international admissions. So as an international admissions officer, like how many curriculums are you looking at when you look at applications?
Yeah, thanks, Gloria. So this is the start of my 12th year in admission, and it's really fun for me to talk about curricula because I'm a nerd and love learning about different modes of learning, right? And I think what we seek to do as admission officers is to really understand the context that students are coming from. And we think about many different contexts, the context of your high school, the context of your home life, now the context of COVID and the way that has impacted us all, but in different ways. And then certainly the context of our applicant pool, right? So those are sort of like the four big contexts that we're thinking about. We recognize that some people have a luxury of choosing the high school that they go to, and even within that, choosing a curriculum that they have the option to take. And for other students, that's not an option, right? So the first thing to say is that we don't have a preference amongst curricula. Our job, though, is to really understand the choices you've had, the options at your high school, and what that means for who you are, what you value, and that kind of inquiry that Nick was talking about so wonderfully, and for who you'll be when you get to our institutions. So there are literally dozens and dozens of curricula that we are training our staff for to review applications. I have a nearly 100-page training manual that talks about different international curricula like the IB or AP or the A-level curriculum, but then many national curriculums across the globe. And it's really our job. That's what we get paid the not so big bucks for, right? To really understand the nuances of those curriculums. And luckily, right, we get to do this with really wonderful people, some of whom you see on this screen, right? We're not in this alone. Most high schools, especially international high schools, will have something called a school profile. That allows us to have a deeper understanding of your high school experience, what's been offered to you. And that can really inform our understanding of that context, right? That sort of high school curriculum context. There are a few other things I think to say about sort of curriculum broadly, and then happy to sort of dive into the IB piece. But we want your courses to be a reflection of what you're interested in, right? We seek to understand who you are and the way in which you're excited to engage in the world. And sort of that plays out in each piece of your application. But whatever curriculum you're in, if you have choices for classes, you should be asking yourself, what classes am I most excited about, right? Again, we understand that lots of people don't have choices. And so that's, again, a sort of a luxury to be able to be making those sort of questions and making those decisions. But if you do have the option to take classes and choose classes, choose the ones that you're most excited about, because that's what we're seeking, right? We want to know the sort of ways in which you're excited to engage. And that gives us the best sense of who you'll be when you get to our institutions. And I think that's sort of where I'll end in terms of broadly, right? Like that major question that we're asking. For us, we always say, you know, your admission to Haverford or any other wonderful institution is not a prize for what you've done. But instead, it's sort of an acknowledgement of what we think you're capable of, right? And so the pieces of information that we're searching for are best understanding the ways in which you'll engage in our community, and as Nick said, globally as global citizens. And so we are really excited to hear from students from any different curriculum, but I think especially as a liberal arts and sciences college, students who have taken the IB are able to answer some of those questions, like who will I be when I get to this university, in really exciting ways. So, Gloria, I don't know if it would be helpful to pass off to someone else and then come back to me, or happy to talk more specifically about the IB experience in our process.
Yeah, no, that was great. And why don't we talk a little bit about course selection, since you talk about, you know, taking the classes that you are interested in. If we can take a step back a little bit, I know, there's obviously some structure to any curricula in terms of like the order of classes you're supposed to take and how you're supposed to proceed. But could we talk a little bit about how Nick mentioned higher level and standard level? Can you kind of give us, and this can be anybody, an overview of you know, how a student goes about with, you know, starting the road of course selection? How does that look at your school? What advice do you have on if they're just starting in the IBDP program?
I'm happy to jump in briefly and talk about what we do, because, you know, we give a lot of advice to parents and students quite early on in the process. So I'm talking really about the beginning of grade 10. We start thinking about this. And some schools, I believe, even in grade 9, will start having their students think about, you know, who they are as individuals and who they want to be and what are their strengths and what are their areas for improvement and those kinds of things. I hear what you're saying, absolutely, Kathleen, about passion. And that to me is the number one priority in my view. But at the same time, you know, as a DP coordinator, I always give a few other aspects that students need to be thinking about. One, obviously, is their academic strengths. So if they're talking about 3 higher levels versus 3 standard levels, we do want students to succeed. And we also know the reality is that part of what gets a student into college is the overall number of IB diploma points that they achieve at the end of the process. So we do have to think about that as well and say, well, you know, if economics is not your strength, then I would advise you not to take it at higher level. But if you really enjoy it, but you're not going to succeed to the level that you want to in terms of the universities you want to go to, then perhaps it's smarter to take a step back, take it as an SL, and do your strength as an HL. So we do that as well. The other thing we think about is, students are at very different stages in terms of knowing themselves and knowing what they really want to do. You have the students who know from grade 9, they're heading to Harvard and they want to do biochemistry. That's their goal. In which case, it's a fairly easy process. If they've got the grades, if they've got the background, then you can put them into the right courses. But there are certain students who really don't know what they want to do and have no real sense of it at the beginning of grade 11 or the beginning of the DP years. But that's the beauty of the DP, which is that you can create a very broad-based program which sets a student up to do almost anything, anywhere. So you can have the students who take 2 sciences because they know that's what they want to do. But if it's not the case, then they would do a science and an arts, and that opens them up to a little bit wider choice. So I think those are the main things that I would talk about to new students and parents.
Mm-hmm. Michelle or Rory, do you have any other thoughts about course selection?
Yeah, so at Western Academy Beijing at WAB, we actually have quite a long process with our students and family. And if there's any counselors on the call, it'll be good to kind of talk about this as well, because our process actually begins in grade 10, early in grade 10. So we have like I call it a trilogy, if you will, presentations. And we have like a quick intro of what the pathway through our high school would look like. And then the second would really be like a deep dive into the IBDP. So our DB coordinator would run that with, and we gather questions from parents, and a lot of parents and students want to know about the assessments. That's like the biggest question that they ask and what they want to know. And then by kind of towards the second half of grade 10, we go into kind of the nitty-gritty logistic of what a course selection process will look like. And each process is like about 2 months long. We have to have a meeting with the counselor, like parents and students, to talk about. And then those conversations really is talking about what are you thinking of doing and where you might want to apply to after in grade 12. So thinking ahead in a year and a half in advance. And that kind of helps us as counselor guide them in terms of what program, and if it's a full DP or if it's a DP cert or if it's like a mixture of both, what program that suits them and their strength, as Nick is mentioning. In terms of higher level and standard level, I'm always repeating this, as it's not a matter of harder or easier, it's actually more or less. Because, as the higher level is 240 hours compared to 150 hour. Because a student will always think, I'll take biology because I don't really like it, so I'll just do a standard level. But that's going to be their hardest class, because if they don't like it, not interested in it, it's going to be such a, I'm not meaning to pick up biology, but it's going to be such a hard 2 years to go through, because it's such a very intricate subject, and there's a lot of memorization and you're pulling information from everywhere. So really depending on what, and as counselors, we actually do a lot of, we have PD on what the classes are. So we talk to the head of departments before the process begins, and we made videos because of, COVID, everything became online. So we have short videos from teachers, and we try to educate the student or get them to be very knowledgeable what course they want to take, so they're not going in blindly. Because of course, as counselors, if they're in grade 11, you don't want to be dealing with course selection changes the first 4 weeks of classes, because you want them to be comfortable and knowledgeable and confident in the subjects they choose. So spend that year. So if you have any grade 10 students in this call, spend that year and spend that time learning about the class, knowing what you want to do, look at the syllabus, talk to the teachers, understand what is happening in that class beforehand. And of course, we have like student panels that we allow them to engage with, like we have grade 12 student panels, and we have grade 11, and we do it so that teachers are not in the room. So we have like ask a DP student anything, and the teachers kind of go away and then they're in the room by themselves, and they have a good 40 minutes to just pelt them with questions. And then it's quite, from what I hear, it's quite, there's the diplomatic answers, but they're also quite open and honest about and why they chose. So yes, that's some here, just hoping the class.
Thank you, Michelle.
Rory, did you want to add to that? Thanks.
Yeah, I would say a process at Dulwich is broadly similar to that. I think probably the question that we get the most from parents and students when it comes to course selection is just being concerned that if you make the wrong selection, that you'll close off various options for university later on. So for the kind of students Nick mentioned who know exactly what they want to do later on, so for example, it might be that you want to do engineering and you want to do it in the UK, that we would look ahead in that case and identify which students the students would have to pick, which subjects would be mandatory. So in that case, that would be higher level maths and higher level physics. But as Kat was saying, and as Nick was saying as well, passion is so important, so that there may be certain subjects that the students do have to choose, but other than maybe a couple of mandatory subjects, the students, wherever you're applying, you do have a lot of flexibility in terms of which subjects you want to choose. And I think something that's maybe a little bit underappreciated by parents and students is how important the subjective part of your application is. So not just what grades you get, because I mean, especially if you're applying for very competitive universities, everybody is going to be getting very good grades. So really what quite selective universities are looking for is what else can you bring to the table that helps you stand out. And because in IB, you do get to choose such a wide range of subjects, and hopefully subjects that you're passionate about, you get so much opportunity to impress your class teachers, to really dive into subjects that you have a deep interest in, to undertake projects such as the extended essay, in which you can manifest real sort of university level research skills. So, I mean, regardless of what you choose, the most important thing is simply just that you're making the most of the opportunity. It's hard to go wrong. No matter what you choose, you're going to be choosing very demanding subjects, very in-depth subjects. And of course, you have to make sure if you're applying for a very specific subject in a certain country that has certain requirements, that you do choose the right courses. But I think generally speaking, course selection is something that probably that parents and students worry too much about. As long as you are choosing subjects that you do feel a genuine affinity for, and you're giving your all to demonstrate that interest in your classes, so your teachers subsequently end up writing about that in the recommendations, or you're able to bring that to bear in the personal statement or college essays that you're writing, then it's more or less all good.
Wonderful. Well, can we talk a little bit about assessments? Because, I think I heard Michelle mention that as something parents are always asking about, but also, in light of COVID, there's been a lot of volatility and and uncertainty with how students are being assessed. So talk a little bit about how IB assesses the students, and then maybe some of the challenges that you may have faced in the last couple of years, and what you're hoping to see in the coming year.
Well, I could talk about assessment, from the perspective of students in Beijing, but also the DP as a whole. I mean, the first thing I guess to say is, I think one of the great things about the DP or the IB philosophy is that they try to ensure that students have a wide range of assessment styles. So in every subject, for example, you do have the exam component, which is roughly 70%. It varies slightly across different subjects. And then the rest, whether it's 30, 35%, is generally independent work or independent projects that then go off to the IB to be assessed or externally marked and moderated. And so what that means is that you can have students who are strong exam takers and do well in the exams, but you're also needing to be strong as an independent thinker, an independent learner. And that's one of the great things about the DP, is it provides that variety. I think it's probably put the DP at an advantage when it comes to COVID, because it means that because the assessment is not purely based on exams, we have a lot of other assessment evidence that can be looked at by the IB if students were unable to take exams. And tied into that, plus predicted grades, which are required, towards the middle or the end of the second year. Generally speaking, I think whether students have done exams or not done exams, the IB has found ways to provide more or less fair assessment. It hasn't always been perfect for every student, and some students have lost out. But I think the IB has also shown itself over the years to be quite flexible. They've made a lot of accommodations, particularly for the Beijing group this past year, the Beijing schools, where the IB knew that we were under pressure, that students were uncertain from day to day whether the exams would go ahead. There were all sorts of health regulations that had to be put in place, and they were changed. We had visits from the local authorities telling us we had to change the location of our exams, even though we were meeting the IB regulations. So things like that happened. Students were under a lot of stress, but at the same time, they made accommodations for that. And in fact, our students ended up doing a little better than expected as a result. So I think in the end, it was generally quite fair. But, as I said, there are always going to be individual students who may be on the wrong side of that. But at the same time, there are there are avenues for students to challenge a result. And we challenge results every year, especially if a student is 1 or 2 points below the upper grade. And generally speaking, a small percentage of students do have the grade raised. So those kinds of things happen. But I think on the whole, the IB has been very accommodating.
Kat, and from your perspective, what are you looking at in terms of assessments, like on your side?
Oh, Gloria, it depends. So we're looking at what a student is able to send us, what a school sends us, recognizing that different schools have different policies on when predicted grades are submitted, and whether or not there are additional grades, 9th through 10th grades or current 11th grades, understanding that for other admission processes outside the United States, sometimes those play a much smaller to zero role in a sort of entrance process. So we certainly are flexible. In an ideal setting, we would have grades from either 9th through 11th grade or 10th and 11th grade, depending on this sort of specific country and school system that we're looking at. And then we would see a student's predicted grades as well. Recognizing that this is a really human process, right? All of it. Sort of being a student is I would say, argue, a deeply human process. You have teachers who are human, who don't have a magic 8-ball in terms of predicting your IB results, though who are generally really good at that. And then our own review process, right, is a deeply human process as well. There are really, I think, sort of foundational questions that we ask. And the first is, do we think the student can be successful, right? That's what we want for every student. And that speaks to what some of my colleagues have already talked about in terms of like feeling, of course, we want you to feel challenged, but we also want you to feel successful in the courses you take in high school. And in the same way, we want you to feel challenged, but also like you're able to be successful at the college and university that you ultimately attend. And I do think sort of the, IB predictions are a sort of a helpful part of a larger puzzle of thinking about that sort of idea of success. What I will say, and in previous Tuesday talks that I've been privileged to be a part of, and in every opportunity that I have to talk about sort of holistic admission more broadly, both speaking for my institution, but for many other institutions that had practiced this sort of same idea, right, is that we also get information from each component of your application. And it's very rarely what you do, but much more why you do it, how you do it, and the way in which you're able to talk about your experiences. So thinking about an IB student and thinking about the way in which they're able to reflect on the opportunities that they've had, sort of that desire for inquiry and the opportunity to think about sort of what is my place in the world? What does it mean to be a global citizen, right? Sort of like the qualitative components of the sort of curricula or scaffolding that you have in the IB, I do think sets students up really well for what in the United States, or for my institution, I often call sort of a process of discernment, right? Like, who are you? What do you value? What does that mean in terms of the community that you hope to join? So sort of specifically, while your IB predictions can be a sort of helpful component of that, much more interesting is getting to hear either in an initial view interview or in an institutional interview, yeah, what are you writing your extended essay on? Why did you choose that? What has this process been? What is most surprising to you about a 4,000 word research project? And thinking, you know, not just that's a tangible representation of what you're capable of, but also the way in which that will lead you to ask big questions and feel confidence in searching for those answers and thinking about that broadly. One of the other cool components, I think, about sort of when we think about sort of like assessment in both a quantitative and qualitative setting is also recognizing a student's ability to critique the experience that they've had, recognizing what has gone well for them and what hasn't, or what are you searching for next, right? And I think sort of that critical inquiry and that component of the IB curriculum, recognizing that there is very infrequently just one answer, is also really an exciting sort of component of hearing, again, who you'll be in our classrooms, who you'll be in our labs, and on. And then, you know, of course, for any institution that's highly residential, but for any institution broadly that's thinking about building community, i.e. every institution, right? The ways in which you think about your place in a specific community, your place in the globe is really, really important. And it's exciting to have sort of the framework through CAS and through theory of knowledge and other sort of components that, again, are sort of built into the IB scaffolding. I think really well prepare students to have sort of more reflection in their process, which ultimately I hope and believe that leads to students choosing a college or university that is the sort of best place for them to thrive and be a better version of themselves, right? And hopefully to sort of remove themselves from getting into that sort of rankings game. So I do think that there are sort of many components of the IB, both in terms of we have the information that we need in terms of the quantitative assessment, but also so many opportunities to really think about sort of that qualitative assessment, which is a much more exciting and nuanced sort of component to that idea of holistic review.
Yeah. Thank you, Kat, for the color. Well, can we talk a little bit about extended essays and CAS? What I'd like to ask the question in a kind of maybe, what are pitfalls that you've seen? Those of you that are in the IB, program, in the IBDP program, like what are some of the things that you wish students would do differently in terms of taking advantage of the extended essay and CAS, and maybe things that you've seen a lot of students do just because, they've watched other people go that direction and not maybe make the most of it, or not taking advantage of the resources that are available. Can you share a little bit about some of the pitfalls you've seen?
Well, I'd say time management is a big one, particularly for the extended essay, but for CAS as well, because both are very long-term projects. So depending on the school, we, for example, start the extended essay process in grade 11, halfway through, but the final essay isn't due until the following October. So it's a very, very long-term process, and students sometimes don't realize that time is of the essence and that they need to get their research done. So that would be the first thing I would say, is students need to have a really good sense of time management. Another problem that arises quite often with the extended essay is the research question. If the research question isn't good, they're going to find 4 or 5 months down the road that it's just not working, and they're going to have to rethink it and go back. So that's often a pitfall that students who are not doing well on the essay find, midway through grade 12, I guess. So those would, to me, would be the two main ones. But also, it's going back to what Kathleen said, it's about passion. Students need to find their passion. And if they're not passionate about their extended essay, if they're not motivated, then they're not going to get it done. They're not going to use that time efficiently. Something I always say to students, and something that I think is a great advantage in the DP, is that there are so many opportunities to make connections across the curriculum, whether it's TOK, whether it's with the extended essay connecting to a subject, whether it's CAS with the service and making connections that come out of the curriculum. And so what I tell students is the more you can make connections to link what you're learning in the classroom with real world problems, with real world issues, and make that your extended essay, make that your service project or your action or activity project, then the more motivated and the more excited and passionate you're going to be. So I guess those are my main thoughts about those two.
Yeah, I would absolutely echo that. And I think it's very important for students to realize what an absolutely fantastic opportunity the extended essay is, in terms of the feedback that their supervisor can potentially pass on to the university counsellor, who can then really sort of leverage that to write some really impressive recommendations. So just off the top of my head this year, there was one student who, I can't remember exactly what she was doing, but I think she was applying some very advanced mathematical formulae to the application of engineering or something like that. And she wasn't even applying for engineering, but I could use that just to demonstrate what an inquiring mind this student had, the research capabilities that she was capable of. And I mean, she was applying for something completely different actually, but I think rather than just me emphasizing she works very hard in class and her teachers are full of praise for her and the usual kind of stuff, the fact that I was able to thrust something like that that's quite interesting, quite different into the spotlight, perhaps was one of the aspects that really helped her recommendation stand out. I mean, she was very happy with the university offers that she received. And I think that applies for whatever you choose, as long as you're passionate about it, and as long as you demonstrate the kind of skills that you'll be applying at university when you're working in a much more independently, then just bear in mind that it's an absolutely fantastic opportunity. I think, to be honest, some students perhaps look at it as a little bit of a chore or a little bit of an afterthought compared with their HLs and their SLs. But again, looking at that subjective element of the university application, you can really sort of make sure that your application stands out by making sure you choose a subject that you are passionate about and that you're willing to dive in very deeply into. Yeah, I think perhaps this is something where IB compares quite favorably with A-levels. I mean, quite a lot of A-level schools will encourage students to do an EPQ, like an extended project as well. But the fact that you're given this opportunity as part of the IB curriculum is an absolutely fantastic opportunity. And I would advise any students who are currently taking it or think of taking it to make sure you do grab that opportunity with both hands, because it's one of the perhaps most accessible ways that you've got as an IB student to really make sure that your application stands out.
Yeah. Michelle, did you have something to add?
Oh yeah, my internet's just a little choppy. I'm not sure if it's if I'm coming through okay.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah. Okay. So I would say, like, the IB program, I would tell a student, and I absolutely echo what Nick and Rory just said. It is time management, but also I feel like the IB tries to mirror what life would be for a student. So if you think about the academics being the job, and then you have your creative activity service outside, and you have extended essay and TOK, like the thinking part. It really tries to mirror what life would be like if you're an adult. So I'll have to say though, just my one criticism of IB is like, how many adults do we know that are that busy? The student is so busy, and they jokingly always say, oh, what is sleep in the DP program, right? They would say that. And they really mean it. They don't sleep very much. But given that they enjoy it, and I think it's a bit of a medal, an honor, like that. Oh, I survived the DP. So they come up with that. So what I would recommend to students when we talk about this is that you need to make it a way of life. So anything that you do, of course, you have to really enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it, then you need to get rid of it, right? So your creativity, activity, and service aspect, which is a requirement of our school, regardless if you're a full DP or not, I would say I would encourage them to look at things that they are interested in, and then we've used the word passionate a lot. And what is it that you want to make the world better? And how would you make an impact? So thinking about it that way, and so that it's ingrained in their life and not like making it, like Rory mentioned the word chore, that it can be a case when they look at, oh, I have to just finish it off. Don't think of it that way. Think of it, how can I make it into a way of my life and incorporate it slowly and do it every day. So it's not like a big buildup. So try not to procrastinate, because that is the death of the IB diploma program. We have strong test taker students who cannot do a project, and that is their downfall of the DP. Like, you can sit an exam, ace it, get a 7, no problem, but that IA that they had to do dragged on. And so it really is trying to build you into a better person and all around aspect. So that's DP.
Thank you. That is a good, honest perspective. And I've heard that as well. I've survived the DP. I think it's a sticker, right? I think it might be a sticker. This is great. I wanted to, Kat, you mentioned this a little bit about where people could, in an interview, you can talk about your extended essay. The other parts of, like, when you're applying, how do you indicate that, I'm guessing, you as an admissions officer, like, we know this quote, I survived the DP. We know it's hard. But given that you enjoy seeing context and you enjoy seeing, understanding kind of the why and the how of it all, how do IB students show that to you? In which components? Rory mentioned the letter of recommendation. That's a great place as well. How are you hoping to get more of that context?
Yeah, great question. I think the honest answer is it's going to be a little bit different for every student, but there is an opportunity to show that in each component of your application. And we want students to be authentic in their applications, of course, and for their voice to come through. But I think that that's really possible through sort of this lens of, how are you learning? How are you engaging in the world? That sort of framework is what we're interested in hearing about you too. So your ability to write well, right? Even if you want to be, we've talked about biology a lot, right? Even if you want to be a biology major, you're going to have to write a lot. And so, your personal statement is a reflection of sort of the amount and the ways in which you've been trained to write. We also recognize that in some ways it's a departure from sort of school writing and can be a challenge for some students, but sort of the framework that you've been giving through the IB curriculum, I think, does allow students to express themselves, right? To be strong communicators. I think also sort of that comes through in terms of, right, like Rory mentioned, teacher letters of recommendation, and those are also viewed in context, right? So understanding that at most IB schools, classes might be smaller than they would be if a student's in a national curriculum. So again, that's a context that we know and understand. And we are thinking about, okay, how has this student engaged in this class? What kind of impact do they make on the academic environment? And I always want to be really clear, I think especially in the American context, sometimes impact is thought of as loudest, and that couldn't be further from the truth, right? There are so many ways that you can make an impact in an academic environment. And so, you know, maybe you're the pot stirrer, you get the conversation going, but at Haverford, average class size is 14. It would be terrible if all 14 of those students were the loud people in their high school classes, right? So it's just as important, just as valuable to have the student who maybe asks one question, but it's that one question that really resonates with the whole class, and that when you're going back to write your literature paper, that's sort of the question that's top of mind for your classmates. Or maybe you're the student who is, you know, thinking about scientific inquiry in different ways, and you're able to take risks in a lab, and you're someone who, you know, is really fun to be a partner with because of sort of the joy you take in learning, and the openness you have to failing, right? Recognizing that that's a part of being a scientist, is failure. So I think sort of those are components that can come through really in really exciting ways through the letters of recommendation. And then I think the sort of last component, we've mentioned the interview a bit before, but I do think, you know, when we think about opportunities to hear your voice come through most directly, if a college or university offers an interview or accepts initial view or, you know, other opportunities, please take advantage of that. I've listened to hundreds, if not thousands, of initial view interviews. I've read many interview reports from Haverford seniors and alums and members of our staff. And 99.9% of the time, they had something really positive that we wouldn't have known from other components of the application. And I think that is really the space where, like, sky's the limit, right? In terms of what you can add and what you can offer to us, furthering our understanding of who you'll be when you get to our campus. And so I think, like, those sort of open-ended questions, you're asked sort of a broad open-ended question if you apply through the common application or the coalition application, or you're responding to a specific question through the personal statement, right? But opportunities to really show how you engage in conversation, how you engage in sort of the sort of intellectual back and forth. That is so helpful in us understanding, again, who you'll be when you get to our classrooms and to our communities. So again, you know, for every student, it's a little bit different. And that's why there's sort of always the approach of, you know, your transcript is most important. What's next most important can totally depend, right? But I do think sort of that opportunity for us to hear directly from you can be most impacted by the opportunities that you have afforded to you through the IB program.
Wonderful. Well, we are rounding up the hour, and so I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss any questions. So if you are in the audience and you are like, I really want to ask this question, now is the time. Now is the time to put that in. And while people are thinking of their questions, I wanted to ask each of you if you had kind of a final piece of advice that you really want to give about how to consider, how to make the most of IB. Anybody want to start?
I guess to me, I mean, one of the most important things, and I think I've touched on it already, really, is to me, it's about students making connections. There are so many opportunities to make it personal, to make it real, to connect biology with the real world, to connect your extended essay with your personal life, to connect your TOK exhibition with your family or your culture or something like that. And so I'm always saying to students, just look out for those connections, because that's what will make it come alive and meaningful and lead to, you know, a better world, which is what we're all about. And it's more important than the grade.
It's more important than what, Nick?
More important than the grade.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's, I'll probably just add to that, in that the DP program is not about the smartest students. So WAB or open policy where anyone can take the DP if they want. And so in that vein, it's not about the smartest students, but how you kind of tackle the DP program. So making connection, and what I mentioned earlier is just enjoying it and doing it because you like it. And you don't like it, then there's other pathways and other options out there too. Like you can just do certificates, the classes that you really like, and you do like a mixture of, in our program, like high school program as well. So, but just enjoy it and don't feel like only the smart kids take it or whatever it is, it's for everyone.
Yeah, I would say it is an absolutely fantastic program. I think it does offer an unrivaled scope amongst all the curricula out there. But I think what's also important to recognize as well is just simply by taking the IB, you don't put yourself at an advantage over students taking A-levels or AP or whatever else. You really do have to make sure you make the most of all those opportunities that are presented to you. I mean, I've had so many questions, having worked at both IB and A-level schools before, as to which is the better curriculum or which ones do universities prefer. And to me, it's like asking what's better, doing yoga or going to the gym. I mean, if you do yoga and you do it every single day and you listen to your trainer and whatnot, that's better than going to the gym once a month and spending half the time playing on your phone when you go there. So obviously, if you take if you take IB, but you don't throw yourself into it and you don't make the most of the opportunities, then simply the fact that you've taken IB is not going to make you stand out. It's all about context in terms of what universities are looking for. So don't think necessarily that IB is better per se than any other curriculum out there. Make sure you understand how well you would fit in with that. Shop around, have a look at what the other curricula have to offer, and make your decision that way. There's no one curriculum that is better than any other, despite the extensive advantages that the IB does have.
Yeah, I think that's such important framework that everyone has shared. And I would just offer, Michelle and Nick and Rory are here. It's nearly 9 p.m. And they're on summer break, right? And I think this is a really wonderful articulation of support you have at your schools. So please, I hope you see us in college admission offices as people that you can run questions by. But more importantly, I hope you know that there are amazing counselors and IB program coordinators and teachers at your school who are here to support you, because all we want for you is to be in that sort of supportive and challenging in all of the right ways curriculum, whether that's the IB or any other one, right? To Nick's point, we're interested in the ways in which you'll engage and change and shape our world, and know that you have the support to be the best version of yourself in many different curricula too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And of course, now we have like a bunch of questions and we're not going to have time to answer all of them. But there are questions about what subjects for HL and SL should I take if I'm interested in engineering, in law, in such and such. So I'm not going to like have you all answer those specific questions, but who do they go to if they're like, what subjects for HL and SL should I take if I'm interested in blank major? The DP coordinator, the counselor, who do they go to?
College counselor.
College counselor?
Usually college counselors would be able to help you navigate that.
Okay, wonderful. And I will ask maybe one, there's a question about senior grade prediction, how important that is. And I don't know, Kat, do you want to give color on that?
Sure. So it is one component for admission in the United States. It will depend, but I will say generally in holistic admission, it is one component of your review, and often an important one, but is also viewed within that broader context, right? So, most students at Haverford have above a 40 with their bonus points coming in, but there are students that we've admitted that have below that because of additional context, or they just started taking English in, courses in English in 11th grade, and that sort of impacts what their ultimate predictions are, right? So there is a lot that goes into our understanding of your ability to be successful when thinking about sort of admission in that holistic sense to colleges and universities in the United States. There are different systems across the globe that would answer that very differently, right? And so speaking sort of for the US.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, great. Well, there are some questions that we did not get to, but this is why we keep doing Tuesday Talks, because we know that the conversation just begins at a Tuesday Talk and it needs to continue. So make sure that you see this as an opportunity to reach out to the people in your life that are able to give you some of these answers. And if they're not able to give them the answers, then reach out to us so that we can direct you in the right direction. And like, as I always say at Editor's Review, like really, life is a conversation. It really is about advocating for yourself, asking questions, finding the people that are going to be able to support you through this process. For all of you in the IB program, hold on to like the joy of all the things that you're doing. Don't get overwhelmed by the time. And then there was a question about time management. I think there are a lot of people that can talk to you about that. And I hope that you are able to, during the summer, at least get a little bit of a breather, relax and have fun, be with your family. And we will see you again next week for those of you who want to talk to some admissions officers. Thank you so much, Nick and Rory and Kat and Michelle, for spending time with us. It's been a real pleasure. You guys are bring encouragement to a sometimes very, very stressful time period of life. So thank you for that. And please enjoy your evening or morning, wherever you are. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.